There is a moment you may not notice at first, a subtle shift in the room when you enter, a quiet tightening in the atmosphere that has nothing to do with noise and everything to do with presence. Conversations pause, energy rearranges itself. Some people suddenly feel exposed, unsettled, or restless without knowing why. This is not arrogance, and it is not imagination. It is what happens when light walks into places that have grown comfortable in shadow. When your presence makes demons uncomfortable, it is not because you are loud, dramatic, or confrontational. It is because truth does not need to announce itself. It simply arrives, and whatever is false begins to tremble. You were never meant to blend in everywhere. There are spaces you will walk into where your calm feels threatening, where your silence feels loud, and where your discernment feels like judgment, even when you say nothing at all. Demons, whether spiritual, emotional, or embedded within human behavior, do not fear aggression as much as they fear clarity. They thrive in confusion, in chaos, in distraction. When you carry inner alignment, when your spirit is anchored and awake, it disrupts environments built on pretense. That disruption is not accidental, it is a response. Darkness recognizes when it can no longer hide. This is why not everyone will be comfortable around you, even when you are kind. Some will project unease onto you, labeling you distant, intense, or difficult to read. What they are truly responding to is the mirror your presence creates. You do not expose others by speaking, you expose them by being. The demons that grow attached to insecurity, manipulation, pride, or deception cannot operate freely around someone who sees clearly. Your awareness limits their movement. Your stillness removes their cover. And that discomfort often reveals itself as irritation, avoidance, or subtle hostility. Understand this carefully. When demons are uncomfortable, they do not always attack openly. More often, they whisper, they stir doubt, they provoke misunderstandings, they attempt to isolate you by turning others against you or by convincing you that something is wrong with who you are. This is why chosen ones often experience seasons of separation, confusion, or sudden distance from people they once felt close to. It is not punishment, it is refinement. When your presence begins to challenge what is hidden, resistance is inevitable. There is a sacred responsibility that comes with carrying this kind of presence. It requires restraint, wisdom, and humility. Not every battle is meant to be fought, and not every truth is meant to be spoken aloud. The power is not in confrontation, it is in consistency. Demons become uncomfortable, not because you argue with them, but because you refuse to participate in their systems. You do not feed drama. You do not chase validation. You do not react emotionally to manipulation. Your quiet integrity becomes a boundary they cannot cross. If you have ever wondered why certain people change around you, why tension arises without explanation, or why peace seems to follow you while chaos retreats, this message is for you. What you carry is not accidental. Your presence is doing work even when you are unaware of it. And as we continue, you will begin to understand why silence strengthens you, why discernment protects you, and why not everyone is meant to walk beside you on this path. One of the most misunderstood truths about spiritual authority is this: it announces itself before words ever leave your mouth. Long before you speak, long before you act, your inner state is already communicating. Your posture, your stillness, your eyes, your restraint, they all speak a language that darkness understands clearly. Demons do not wait for confrontation to recognize a threat. They sense coherence. They sense someone who cannot be easily influenced, confused, or pulled into emotional chaos. This is why reactions often happen instantly before you've done anything wrong. The response is instinctive, not logical. Darkness survives by blending in. It thrives where boundaries are weak, where discernment is dulled, and where people are emotionally reactive. When someone enters a space carrying self-awareness and inner order, it disrupts that ecosystem. The unclean becomes visible. The manipulative feels exposed. The deceptive loses leverage. This is why your presence alone can provoke discomfort. You are not attacking anything, but you are removing the conditions that allow it to function comfortably. And anything that depends on concealment will resist being seen. This resistance does not always look dramatic. Often it is subtle. People may suddenly misunderstand your intentions. They may become defensive for no clear reason. They may feel compelled to test your boundaries, push your patience, or draw you into unnecessary explanations. This is not coincidence. When darkness senses it cannot control you, it attempts to destabilize you. The goal is not always to defeat you, but to distract you, to pull you out of your centered state and back into emotional engagement where it has influence. This is why silence becomes such a powerful weapon, even though it feels passive on the surface. When you do not react, when you do not rush to defend yourself, when you do not explain what does not need explaining, you deny darkness its preferred entry point. Many people mistake silence for weakness because they have only known power through noise, argument, and domination. But spiritual authority operates differently. It is grounded, it is measured, it waits. And waiting frustrates forces that rely on urgency and impulse. You may notice that the more disciplined you become internally, the stronger the reactions around you feel externally. This is not because you are becoming harsh or distant, it is because you are becoming unavailable to manipulation. Your energy is no longer scattered, your emotions are no longer easily provoked, your attention is no longer for sale, and when darkness cannot access you directly, it often works indirectly, through misunderstandings, gossip, or emotional pressure from others. This is where many chosen ones become discouraged, thinking they are doing something wrong, when in truth, they are doing something right. Pay attention to what intensifies when you remain calm. Notice what collapses when you refuse to engage. Watch how certain behaviors lose strength simply because you do not feed them. This is not accidental. Your presence is refining the environment around you. And as this continues, you will begin to understand why discernment is more important than explanation, why boundaries matter more than approval, and why your peace is the clearest sign that something unclean has lost its grip. When direct influence fails, darkness changes strategy. It becomes observant. It watches instead of reacting. This is a phase many chosen ones misinterpret because the chaos seems to pause, yet tension remains. You may notice fewer overt conflicts, but a heightened sense of being monitored, evaluated, or quietly assessed. This is not paranoia, it is perception. When demons realize they cannot provoke you emotionally or control you through fear, they begin to study you, searching for patterns, weaknesses, or unresolved wounds they can exploit later. This is why discipline becomes critical during seasons of calm. Silence may increase, external noise may fade, but inner vigilance must remain sharp. Darkness is patient when it has to be. It waits for moments of fatigue, loneliness, or overconfidence. It waits for you to lower your guard emotionally, to assume the battle has ended simply because it has gone quiet. But silence is not always peace. Sometimes it is reconnaissance, and awareness during this phase determines whether you remain protected or become vulnerable through complacency. You may feel an unusual pull toward introspection during this time, a heightened sensitivity to energy, a stronger intuition that alerts you when something is off, even if you cannot explain why. This is not accidental. As darkness observes, your discernment sharpens in response. You begin to notice inconsistencies in words and actions. You sense when kindness is performative, when interest is strategic, when concern is conditional. These perceptions are gifts, but they also come with responsibility. Seeing clearly means you must choose wisely where you place your trust. During this phase, darkness often attempts imitation. It mirrors your language, adopts spiritual vocabulary, or disguises itself as growth, concern, or even support. This is one of its most subtle tactics. Not everything that speaks truth carries truth. Not everyone who appears aligned is safe. This is why discernment goes beyond words. It listens to tone, observes consistency, and measures fruit over time. Your presence forces deception to work harder, but that effort reveals itself to those who are paying attention. You may also notice attempts to gather information about you indirectly, questions framed as curiosity, conversations that feel casual but probe sensitive areas, sudden interest in your past, your struggles, your boundaries. This is not always malicious in a human sense, but spiritually it signals assessment. Darkness wants to know where pressure could be applied if needed. This is why restraint in sharing becomes essential. Not everyone deserves access to your inner world. Privacy is not secrecy, it is stewardship. This is the moment where many chosen ones either mature or falter. If you remain grounded, observant, and selective, darkness finds no entry point and eventually retreats. But if you mistake observation for safety and overshare, overextend, or seek validation, you reopen doors that were closing. Your presence is already powerful. Protect it. Let your consistency speak. Let your silence remain intentional. What cannot be read cannot be used against you. There comes a point when darkness realizes it cannot influence you directly, cannot destabilize you emotionally, and cannot gain access through observation. When this happens, the environment around you begins to shift. Relationships feel strained. Familiar connections loosen. Invitations fade. Conversations shorten. This is not because you have become cold or distant. It is because alignment creates distance naturally. When your presence grows stronger, what cannot grow with you begins to fall away. Separation is not rejection. It is filtration. Many chosen ones struggle during this phase because separation feels like loss. The human mind looks for reasons, for mistakes, for something to fix, but spiritually, this stage is protective. Darkness thrives in groups where compromise is normalized, where silence is discouraged, and where boundaries are treated as threats. When you no longer participate in those dynamics, your presence disrupts the agreement that once held the group together. Distance becomes the path of least resistance for them and for you. This is also when subtle narratives may form around you. You may be labeled distant, proud, or difficult to reach, not because these labels are true, but because they make your absence easier to justify. Darkness prefers stories that preserve comfort rather than truth. It would rather reframe your growth as a flaw than acknowledge its own exposure. This is why defending yourself during this phase is unnecessary and often counterproductive. Explanation invites debate. Silence allows truth to settle on its own. Separation teaches discernment in ways comfort never can. When familiar voices fade, you begin to hear your own more clearly. When external validation disappears, internal alignment becomes essential. This is where many discover that their peace was never dependent on people. It was dependent on obedience to their inner truth. Darkness resents this realization because independence weakens its influence. The less you need approval, the harder you are to control. There is also a refinement that occurs in solitude. Without constant interaction, you notice patterns you once ignored. You recognize how often you gave more than you received, explained more than necessary, and tolerated what drained you. This awareness is not meant to harden you, but to mature you. Boundaries stop feeling like walls and start feeling like wisdom. You no longer withdraw out of fear, you step back out of clarity. If you are experiencing separation right now, do not rush to replace what is leaving. Do not force connections out of loneliness. Let the distance do its work. What remains after silence, space, and time is what belongs. Your presence is not meant to be diluted for comfort. It is meant to be preserved for purpose. Calm is often mistaken for indifference, but in reality it is one of the clearest signs of inner authority. When you remain calm in situations designed to provoke you, you remove the fuel that manipulation depends on. Darkness feeds on emotional reactions, defensiveness, anger, fear, urgency. These reactions create openings. They cloud judgment and pull attention away from truth. Calm, on the other hand, keeps your perception intact. It allows you to observe without absorbing, to listen without surrendering your center. Manipulation becomes visible when it no longer works. When you do not react as expected, patterns reveal themselves. Words lose their charm. Tactics repeat. Pressure becomes obvious. This is why calm makes demons uncomfortable. It exposes intention. Without confrontation, without accusation, simply by not responding emotionally, you force what is hidden to surface. Silence becomes a spotlight, and anything operating in secrecy does not survive sustained visibility. This does not mean you become passive or submissive. Calm is not weakness, it is restraint. You are choosing not to waste energy on performances meant to distract you. You are choosing not to validate behavior that relies on chaos to feel powerful. This choice shifts the balance of control. Suddenly, the one trying to provoke feels uneasy, uncertain, and exposed. The roles reverse. What once felt dominant begins to feel desperate. There is a moment when manipulation realizes it has lost its grip. You can see it in the shift of tone, in the escalation, in the attempt to force a reaction through urgency or guilt. This is the moment many people give in, mistaking pressure for importance. But when you remain calm here, something breaks, the strategy collapses, the mask slips, and what remains is often resentment, withdrawal, or sudden silence from the other side. This is not failure, it is confirmation. Calm also protects you from internal conflict. When you react emotionally, you often replay situations in your mind, questioning your responses, doubting your choices. Calm reduces this mental noise. It allows you to leave interactions without residue. You do not carry conversations with you. You do not rehearse arguments that never happened. This mental clarity is one of the greatest threats to darkness, because confusion is one of its most effective tools. If you have ever felt someone become uneasy simply because you did not react, understand this. Your calm is doing more than you realize. It is communicating boundaries without words. It is exposing intention without accusation. And it is preserving your peace without compromise. This is not avoidance, this is mastery. When manipulation no longer works and calm has removed emotional leverage, darkness often turns to urgency. Sudden pressure appears. Decisions are framed as time-sensitive. Conversations feel rushed, demanding immediate responses or commitments. This tactic is deliberate. Urgency compresses discernment. It pushes you to act before you can fully sense, evaluate, or pray through a situation. Darkness understands that patience protects you, so it tries to steal your time and distort your pace. You may notice this urgency arriving unexpectedly after periods of quiet clarity or separation. Just as you begin to feel settled, something appears that demands quick action. A message, a request, a crisis, a sudden emotional appeal. This is not coincidence. When your presence becomes untouchable through awareness and restraint, urgency is used to reintroduce instability. It aims to pull you back into reaction mode where boundaries blur and old patterns resurface. Chosen ones often feel this pressure more intensely because they are accustomed to responsibility. They care deeply. They want to do the right thing. Darkness exploits this by framing urgency as duty or compassion. But true wisdom is never frantic. What is meant for you will withstand time. What requires haste often carries hidden cost. Learning to pause, even when urgency feels justified, is one of the clearest signs of spiritual maturity. There is power in delayed response, not as avoidance but as discernment. When you slow down, urgency loses its grip. The emotional charge fades, clarity returns, and what was once framed as critical often reveals itself as unnecessary or manipulative. Darkness relies on speed because speed prevents reflection. Stillness dismantles it. Patience exposes the absence of substance beneath pressure. You may notice resistance when you choose not to rush. Others may accuse you of being unresponsive, indifferent, or uncooperative. This resistance confirms the tactic at play. Those who respect your boundaries will honor your pace. Those who benefit from your haste will not. Learning to distinguish between the two protects your energy and your purpose. You are not obligated to move faster than your discernment allows. If you feel pressured to decide before you feel clear, pause. If something demands urgency but threatens your peace, wait. Your presence becomes strongest when you refuse to be hurried out of alignment. Darkness loses influence the moment it cannot control your timing. When your presence stabilizes, when you no longer react, rush, or seek approval, something unsettling happens for those who are internally conflicted. Your peace highlights their unrest. Your clarity exposes their confusion. This contrast can give rise to envy, not always expressed openly, but felt in tone, distance, or subtle resistance. Envy in this context is not about wanting what you have externally. It is about being confronted with what they have avoided internally. Darkness thrives on this discomfort, turning comparison into quiet hostility. This hostility rarely announces itself. It shows up as passive remarks, reduced support, or a sudden lack of enthusiasm for your growth. People who once celebrated you may become indifferent. Those who relied on your availability may feel threatened by your boundaries. This shift is not because you have changed for the worse, but because you have changed in a way that removes their sense of control or relevance. Your presence no longer feeds their needs, and that absence is felt as loss on their end. Envy often disguises itself as concern or critique. Advice becomes unsolicited. Questions carry an edge. Encouragement feels conditional. These behaviors are not always conscious, but they are revealing. When someone is uncomfortable with your alignment, they may attempt to destabilize it subtly through doubt, sarcasm, or comparison. Darkness prefers this approach because it maintains plausible deniability while still applying pressure. Recognizing this pattern allows you to respond with wisdom rather than reaction. This is where emotional maturity is tested. It is tempting to withdraw completely, to harden, or to confront every perceived slight. But restraint here is essential. Not every reaction deserves engagement. Not every discomfort needs to be addressed. Sometimes the most powerful response is consistency, remaining the same regardless of shifting attitudes. Over time, authenticity exposes envy without effort. Truth does not need defense, it needs time. As your presence continues to settle, you may notice that genuine connections become fewer but deeper. Those who are aligned with your growth will not feel threatened by your peace. They will feel inspired, challenged, or encouraged. Others will naturally drift away. This is not division, it is differentiation. Darkness resists this process because clarity reduces its influence. The more defined you become, the less room there is for projection and confusion. If you sense subtle hostility where there was once warmth, do not internalize it. This is not a signal to shrink or explain yourself. It is confirmation that your presence is doing its work. Stay grounded, stay observant. Let time reveal what alignment sustains and what insecurity cannot tolerate. There is a form of protection that does not announce itself, does not draw attention, and does not rely on force. It operates quietly, strengthening as you remain aligned with truth. When your presence makes demons uncomfortable, protection does not arrive as spectacle. It arrives as restraint. Situations that once would have pulled you into chaos begin to dissolve before fully forming. Conflicts that could have escalated lose momentum. Doors that would have led to compromise close gently without drama. This is not luck. It is alignment at work. Protection often feels like inconvenience before it feels like safety. Opportunities fall through. Connections fade. Plans change unexpectedly. At first, this can feel frustrating or even disappointing, but